Okay, please excuse me. I have lost my voice a little bit, so bear with me. I want to thank everyone here at the Norman Bruce and Hema and Art and all of these incredible people. It's been a thrill to participate in this exhibition, and I just wanted to say thanks for that. I'm going to start with an image that I think describes my work all the way through up until the present. This is Enchanted Rock, and as a 13-year-old eighth grader, I got to go on a field trip, and coming from Houston, saw this rising out of the Texas Hill Country, and it's a huge pink granite batholith, and it made a really large impact and kind of sparked my interest in landscape and trying to recreate the landscape. It also deals with my interest in geology, so I thought I would show what Enchanted Rock was at one time, which is, should I use the laser pointer? I don't know if it'll work, but where it says Pluton, that is what Enchanted Rock was at one time. And then slowly, as erosion happened, that black Pluton rose to the top. And so I'm going to jump forward and show, since this is a clay-centric exhibition, in 2010, 2011, my family and I moved to Ohio, and until before that time, I hadn't used clay. I used it in high school, or a little bit, but there was such a big clay culture in Ohio, and particularly at Denison, and so I began to experiment with using this material directly from the earth into my work. So these are 3 examples. I'm interested in forcing materials together, so whether it's minerals, plaster, and then tinted porcelain in this case. And these are kind of vessel-sized shapes. And also I have a practice that deals with wall works. And this is a more recent example. This is done this summer, and it's kind of, all of this body of work was made with one mold and trying to force the different materials together. So it's paper, plaster, clay, and then cactus quartz in the center. This is an example of another sort of clay experiment that eventually got usurped into a piece downstairs. That's one of the tabletop pieces called Alexander. But I wanted to show this as an example of what can happen in the studio, where you kind of can cannibalize one piece and turn it into an entirely different one. This is another wall piece made this summer, and the top part is paper, layers of dyed paper cut with racers, and the bottom part is ceramic, tinted ceramic. Here's another sculpture. And this one is downstairs as well, and it references Eagle Mound. When in Ohio, there are all of these mounds from the Hopewell culture from 2,000 years ago, and that was kind of inspiring this body of work also, where you see the kind of different terrains, things underneath, things on top. I showed this picture because some of the work in the show downstairs I created in a barn in upstate New York. And I wanted to show the way that the barn directly influences the work. So whether it's with the wood joinery or literally becoming part of the hanging mechanism for the piece. And then that blue silicone is the mold they used to make a majority of the pieces. And here's that completed piece from this fall. I have this to show as a source for inspiration as well. And it's Le Corbusier's the Legislative Assembly in India. And looking at the idea of this cast concrete structure and then the holes pierced through was a big inspiration. And then this piece is a direct sort of referencing of that Chandigarh with the cast hydrostone and then the moments where you can see through the negative space. And that's it.
Hi, nice to be here tonight. I'm thrilled to be in this show. It's been a really great experience, and I'm really happy to be here. I wanted to talk about when something goes from the ordinary to the extraordinary. This is a piece of Italian needle lace. And I'm mostly going to talk about stuff that I just swoon over, stuff that I just die for, stuff that really turns me on. And it's varied. Like I have a huge eclectic taste, and you might get some kind of insight into the way that I work and the stuff that I look at. I'm always looking for ideas. I never know where they come from. So anyways, you can see this starts out as a piece of fabric. The fabric is cut away, and it can be made into a piece of lace. And how that happens is with the needle. These are Peruvian needles from the 1st century to the 16th century. The needles are the most amazing thing to me. So these are pre-Columbian needles. I look at some of this old needlework and I'm blown away by how did they even make needles to do that? And the needlework for me has become really sort of paramount. And the needles make something like this possible. A cape from 1895. It's French. We don't know the maker, but I just think it's just amazing. And I also think it's a piece of sculpture. I also think it's a piece of art. I think it's also amazing that it exists in this kind of condition. It was probably a very, very special object when it was first made. As I said, I'm always looking for ideas. I never know where I'm going to find them. And even if I'm looking at a painting, this was a painting at the Denver Art Museum, you see what I zero in on. I zero in on her cuff. And everything for me is always in relationship to human beings. My project for 30 years has been working my way through the house and everything in relationship to human beings. So I've remade every single thing in the house. And I'm all about what my 10 fingers can do. I celebrate what my fingers can do. I love machineries, I have power tools and all that kind of thing, but I love what my 10 fingers can do. So you go from something like that to something like this, which is patchwork, vintage lace made by the Caillot sisters, the Caillot Serres. They started a fashion house in 1895 in France, but they did something really interesting. They took vintage lace and patchwork it together into these beautiful, beautiful garments. And it was also a moment where the shape of the woman was changing. The corset was gone. It was revolutionary, really, and the Caillot sisters were part of that. Now we go to something else. I love color. This is Peruvian. It's 700 to 850 AD. It's resist dyed, and if you'll see, it's all patchworked together. It's all sewn together. Those are all different pieces of fabric that are patchworked together. You'll also notice this is a garment. So the head, it's like a big poncho. The head sticks out the top, and these are the sleeves. Amazing. I mean, high fashion, if you ask me. I did study fashion for 2 years in school at Parsons, but I always wanted to be an artist, and the last straw came when my design teacher said, "Joel, stop making art and start making dresses." And I said, "No, wait, I want to be an artist." So I switched and I studied sculpture, and it's the best thing I ever did. So now we come to some American patchwork. This is actually a quilt from about 1870 in Kentucky. And again, it's taking the ordinary and making it absolutely extraordinary. And I think that's what art should do. Art should be the extraordinary. It should be the stuff that doesn't exist in everyday life. It should be, you should stand in front of it and you should just be like full of wonderment. And I love a sense of wonderment. I love for people's mouths to drop when they stand in front of an artwork. It's quilted, so that means there's 3 layers, and the 3 layers are sewn together. I love the needlework for me also, like this was women's work, and it was also, this was a luxury item. The idea that quilts were made out of leftover fabrics and it was done to be frugal is not really correct. To take this, all these fabrics, cut them into 800 pieces, sew them together, quilt it, they could have easily taken the whole piece of fabric and put it together and just used that. So it wasn't a leisure activity. It was actually, a lot of it was done by servants. Early it was done by servants, and the servants decided, gee, do I want to be milking the cow or do I maybe want to be inside quilting? But it was women's work, and I love the idea that, like me as a man today, like we may have the first women president next year, which is very exciting. And so, like, if, we can have a woman president, why can't I make quilts? So now we go to a piece of Japanese patchwork. It's 18th and 19th century. So the fabrics are from the 18th century, but the patchwork was done in the 19th century. And in the Japanese, they have this beautiful metaphor for patchwork, that when fabrics are saved and patched together, it's a metaphor for an extended life. So they are really using fabrics that are fugitive, that have worn out, that have holes in them. They cut the holes away and they patch it together. In Japan, the more something has been patched, the more it's worth. So they have I've seen little shards of fabric like this in frames, and they've been patched and sewn and patched and sewn. And they're super, super precious. So I love this kind of thing. Also, I'm a total Japanophile, and I love anything that's Japan. So, yeah, right on. Power to, yeah. Then we come to an American sampler. And samplers, to me, are really interesting. It was the height of a little girl's education. This girl was 10 years old in Kentucky and did this. And after she was 10 years old, like most of them, they're either from 8 to 18. They did these, and it was at the end of their education. They made these things, and to me, they're sublime. I just really, I love it that, like, no one would take the time to do this today. I love it when people stand in front of a piece of artwork and they go, like, I could never do that. Artwork should be something that not everybody can do. This is my idea of a sampler. So it's a small piece, it's 10 by 20 inches, but I'm also doing it with beads. It's also after these are all musical. So this one is a cadenza, which is the part in the violin solo where there's a note that the composer writes, and there's a beginning note and an end note, but between those two notes, the violinist can do anything he wants. And there's very famous cadenzas by very famous violinists that people copy. So this was me starting, this is my cadenza in pink. But I'm also looking at Native American beadwork. This is a piece from the Denver Art Museum, and I think, again, it's couture, it's high fashion. A friend of mine there's a bead district in Los Angeles where I live, and a friend of mine took me to the bead district, and he said, I just want to show you the bead district. What's that? He goes, well, come on, I'll show you. And there's store after store after store like this. So I walked in, and I was sort of blown away, and it took me a year to think about it, what I was going to do with it. What could I do with it? I'm always thinking, like, no matter where I'm at, what can I do with that? Well, so this is a dress that was worn by Grace Kelly. This was, I only wish I could live up to this. I'm trying hard to do this kind of beadwork. This was you can't even imagine how much this weighs. This was at the Chinese Theater, which is around the corner from where I live, and it was on display there, so I was very lucky to be able to see it. This was the first sewn beaded piece that I made, and it's Sonatina in green. And all of these pieces come after the Whistler. This is Nocturne in black and gold, or the Falling Rocket. And, when Whistler made these, they were outrageous because they looked like a bunch of splattered paint, John Ruskin said. And so, but they were all after musical titles, so I've sort of incorporated that. This is a Matador's jacket, and it's all done with gold work. And gold work are these little coils of gold wire, and then they're sewn down, and it's unbelievable. So I went out there and I found, where do you buy these coils of gold thread? You buy them in France, and I ordered from France, and it came. And so here's my sampling in an old style. And sampling is also a musical thing that people sample. It's a small piece. You see down at the bottom, I started sort of normal, and then I go like, oh, heck, let's just blow it out of the water here, So this is a piece of Spanish lace. And, you think of lace as like this white thing and not very colorful. Well, there's this tradition in Spain where they do this incredibly bright-colored lace, and it's all done with a needle. It's all sitting there with a needle and a piece of thread and weave. It's needle weaving is really what it is. I don't know how to do it. I'm dying to find somebody to teach me how to do it. So if anybody here knows how, let me know. But also, I love color. The textiles have become, I've always loved textiles, but these eye dazzlers. And so it's the last phase of these Navajo blankets, and they had imported these commercial yarns from Germany. They're called Germantown eye dazzlers for obvious reasons. And this was also at the Denver Art Museum, and I just think they're great. I think they're like, sometimes I wish contemporary art did this for me. Sometimes I think that contemporary art falls short. It doesn't have the impact that this has. And so now we come to a Charles James dress that will stand up by itself. Charles James only did couture. He made 800 dresses his whole career. There was a retrospective at the Met a couple years ago. But the combination of materials is unbelievable. The lace, the silk, the white, everything about it. Charles James believed the woman was made to fit in the dress, not the dress made to fit the woman. So, in other words, suck it in and suffer for the look, because you're gonna look fabulous. These are 1965 Cristobal do Balenciaga. And I mean, need I say more? the combination of these, all those ostrich feathers are put on one at a time. Those ostrich feathers, they take one piece out of an ostrich and then they tie another one on to get it longer. And then they're all sewn on individually. So the handwork in this, you see why the couture is so expensive, but amazing, right? I love weird combinations of things, like unexpected combinations of things. This is a writing box from Japan, a photo that I took from the Tokyo National Museum. I was lucky enough to go there a couple years. I'd seen stuff in catalogs, and then I was finally lucky enough to get to go, and I was like, oh my God, there it is. But it's bronze, it's rosewood, it's all these different things that you wouldn't expect to see together. And that's sort of my modus operandi. This is just a beautiful screen at a tea house. Again, it's Japanese, so they have just this incredible, delicate sensibility. Now we go, like I said, I've worked my way through the house and I've made every piece of furniture in the house. I've made a toilet, I've made a car, I've made a garage door, I've made rugs, I've made silverware, I've made it all. But this kind of thing really I love because it's so unusual. It's a cabinet from Bolivia, 1770. So it's the Europeans coming over and having some influence on the native people, and this is what results. And that combination, I love the blending of cultures. I think America, we're all about that. We are the melting pot, and I think the future is a blended future. And I mean, this object is just so fantastic. The paint on it, everything about it. This is the cabinet from the Huntington Library. I love it that it's all about delight. And like there's too much serious stuff in the world. Like, let's have some fun. It looks like a castle. It looks like a cottage. Imagine you put your books in there and how much fun it would be to go get a book from this. Furniture for me is great sculpture. Like and also for me, I love the fact that like, you wouldn't really sit at this, but you could come home and set your purse on it, or, you could put flowers on it. Of course, I would sit at it and have dinner, and I would invite all of you over and we'd all have dinner at it. So, anyways, this is a Thomas Garrett Rietveld sideboard. Thomas Garrett Rietveld was Dutch, and I love the geometries in this thing. It's really fantastic. He was part of the De Stijl movement, or the style. Now we go to something, this is a Donald Judd bed. Donald Judd was a minimalist. This was the bed that he made for his two daughters. So maybe I think it's pretty neat. I think that so of course there'd be a mattress on there, and maybe their heads face the same direction. Maybe they're mad at each other and they face opposite directions. I'm in love with Donald Judd furniture, and I've grown always for me, the Baroque, the Rococo was my model. That fancy crap, I just like it, 18th century continental Europe, I swoon for. So, but I've grown to really love this 1970s minimalist stuff, and I can incorporate that now into my own work. This is a favorite sculpture of mine. This is a sculpture by Tony Smith, and unlike Donald Judd never titled anything. Everything was untitled. He never wanted to attach a word to any of it, except like when he made a bed, because it's a bed. This piece It's a Tony Smith, and it's called Marriage. So it's two lines going like this and meeting. And I love that. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful representation of marriage. And I just like it. What can I say? Now we come to we're at Japan again. And so here's a samurai. And when I first saw these samurai outfits, this is a photo I took in Japan. And I love the soft and hard. That there's all this silk cord on there, but then there's all this steel in there. And the combination to me is amazing. I love the idea of soft things and hard things together. So my idea of soft and hard is there's a soft quilt hanging. It's called My Mother's Eyes because I kept having a discussion I kept calling her and saying, have you ever done a quilt like this? Would you ever do that? Oh, I would never do it like that, but you could do it like that. And so I kept calling her and we were having this phone conversation. So I called it. It was like seeing it through her eyes. Then on the floor is a concrete quilt, and I've made several concrete quilts. It's the Hawaiian-style Hollywood Sampler concrete quilt. And it's porcelain, it's stoneware, it's concrete, it's amethyst, it's turquoise, it's marble, it's granite, and it's also got shapes from Busby Berkeley in there. So there's behind the quilt. The quilt isn't quilted with batting, it's quilted with silk organza, so it's transparent. I made the top, and I said, oh, that's so beautiful, like the back of it, I don't really want to cover it up. So, and it's really, because it becomes like a piece of stained glass. It's now at the National Quilt Study Center in Lincoln, Nebraska. So, as I said, I love these combinations of things. This is a piece of Chinese export porcelain. It was made in China, but made for the American market. They also made it like people would order sets of dinnerware. They would give them the designs, and then in China they would execute them. And I love it because it's like they had never seen an angel in China. And they had never really experienced the Baroque there. And so it's a little bit lobotomized. It's a little bit wrong. It's sort of like the Bolivian cabinet, I think. It's a little bit off, and it's a strange combination. So one of my first loves was Chinese export porcelain. Now, I made many works after Chinese export porcelain, and instead of a picture of the king and the queen in the middle, there was a picture of Queen, the rock group. Here's also like, God is in the details. That's a quote by Mies van der Rohe. These are roof tiles from Spain. Imagine, like up on the roof, you don't even see them. It's like, and it's also the hora vacui. The hora vacui were 16th, 17th century, and they believed the devil dwelled in empty space. So they covered every single square inch of their homes with decoration. And I could be all about that. Here's a Clément Massier pot. Clément Massier was a French potter from 1900. He showed at the Le Galerie Art Nouveau, which gave the movement its title. He did these reduction lusters, which nobody really knows how to do. It was all secretive. His assistant, Sicard, was hired by the Weller Company to come to America and do his whole line of Sicardo ware. So we're talking, this is 1910, 1908. And again, this is the stuff I just really love. I think all of this, too, is also influenced by Japan. Here's a George Orr pot, the Mad Potter of Biloxi. Sublime, just sublime, amazing. A raku pot by the Raku the 17th. So the 17th master raku, he's alive now. This is the raku master that's making pots now. It started like 1570. They say that they were making so many roof tiles, they were pulling them out of the kiln and they were putting them in straw, and then the straw left all this beautiful marks on the pottery, and the Japanese embraced that. There's an oribe. This is like the year 1600, and it's a food dish. This is like, and it's all about delight. It's all about like just having fun. Like imagine that's got 3 little things in there and you're taking your chopsticks down to pull them out. Wonderful. This was Oribe was, he was friends with the great tea master, Senno Rikyo, and they started making things together for the tea ceremony. I really love Japanese imari. Japanese imari is layers, like it's porcelain, it's got a layer of cobalt blue, it's got glaze, it's got enamels, and then it has gilding. So, and it goes through the kiln, 10, 12, 15 times. Beautiful. And also, I love this whole thing. This was in a home in Japan that I'm walking down the street. There's no glass there. They had set up, and this is all probably the objects of their ancestors. And it was for a festival, and they pull them out to decorate the front of the home. My version of imari, these bowls are about 24 inches across, stoneware, all those layers. It has the cobalt, it has the stoneware, the cobalt, the glaze, and the lusters. I think these go through the kiln, I don't know, maybe 8, 9, 10 times. And then, of course, we come to Sèvres porcelain. This was the first thing that I really, really, really loved. If you go see the show at the Nelson, there's unconventional clay at the Nelson, and there's Tom Sachs' piece. Tom Sachs has recreated this out of shoestrings, a bottle. What else was that made out of? Like, he's made it out of all these normal stuff. So go there and look at it, but it really doesn't compare to this. These are, it's good, but it's not this. The Sèvres is the royal manufacturer of porcelain. It still exists today in France, and it was invented for Louis XIV. And these are like the elephants are candlesticks, and then there would be flowers in there. So imagine that, how wonderful that is. And then we come to some of my very favorite things, these ormolu-mounted Chinese porcelains. So it's a 17th century vase, but mounted in the 18th century in France. Now these things were super, super rare, getting anything from China. So my idea is that it arrives in France, and they go, oh, yeah, très magnifique, très belle. And they go, but it's a little bit simple, I think it needs a little bit more. We need to make it more special. So they add this other stuff to it, and they make it in their own taste. And I just swoon for these things. So another piece. So here's a Chinese gourd vase and ormolu mounted. It's mercury gilded, so they would float gold in mercury, put the piece in, heat the mercury up, the mercury boils away, and then the gold attaches to the bronze. Of course, it kills the gilder, but look at what you get. There's some place on this earth that they do it, maybe. There's nothing like mercury gilding. So these are Meissen vases. So those others are. So all of a sudden now, the story of porcelain is amazing because no one knew how to make it in Europe until 1703. And it was Count Augustus the Strong, and he invented the Meissen factory. So these are Meissen, and they're trying to imitate the Chinese. Some of them came very close, but I think it's also like the Chinese trying to make the European style and the Chinese export. It's a little bit lobotomized, like these Meissen are in the Chinese style, but a little bit off. And I like it that way. Here's another, these are also Meissen figures that have been mounted. Just great. It's also the combination of materials, the ceramic with the bronze, with the gold, really, really wonderful. Now this is where it gets really nutty. So you have a Meissen figure, you have a silver pot, you have some other pot over here, and you have French flowers. And it's all a combination of these things that are mounted and put together in France. So I sort of think that, like, I mean, you go downstairs and look at my work, I'm all about this. So I don't probably have to point it out to you, like, but I love putting these things together that don't go together, and it's called a marriage. You know, that's what, like, two things that go together that have to, that for the rest of their lives have to rely on each other. I not only look at, like, the Chinese mounted, you know, ormolu mounted Chinese celadon or the Meissen mounted things, but here's a mechanism to hold a pre-Columbian figure at the LA County Museum, and I find it really, and it's for earthquakes, you know? It's for safety reasons. They don't want it to crash in an earthquake. But of course, as an artist, like, I find I'm looking at that and going, what can I do with that? And then I come back to Whistler, James McNeill Whistler. This is the Whistler Peacock Room, and which is at the Freer Gallery in Washington, D.C. I was looking last night to find this image. I understand it's closed until 2017. Darn it. It's just amazing. I mean, to make that kind of environment, really amazing. So we end up with a Wall of China. There's 2 walls of China downstairs that I made, and it's a pun, you know. It's not made in China, but ceramics was really invented in China. And so it's me mounting these things. This piece was made in 1997. It's mostly American pottery. In this piece, like, the pieces downstairs are commercial pottery. There is commercial pottery in this. But this one I started buying as many little pinch pots and homemade pots by 3rd graders. The elephant at the top says, "Merry Christmas, Mommy and Daddy, 1972. There's all these little things in there that would never make it into a museum, but are incredible. At one moment in somebody's life were really, really, really precious. And for me, the question is, how does it become devalued? Why does that happen? And I'm just curious about it, you know? I'm curious about things exchanging value. Well, I don't really want to make diamonds not valuable, but I want to make maybe broken glass look like diamonds, is interesting to me. So in this lecture, like, this is a few things that I love. I could go on and on. I'd like to mention Thomas Chippendale, David Bowie, rock and roll. I'd like to thank Mies van der Rohe for all the beautiful inspiration that these people have given me. And thank you so much for being here.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Joel. Whoa. Wait, let's see. How do I do this? Just to go. Okay. Also, thank you to the Nerman and everybody here who's been very supportive of this project. And also, I feel very honored to be in this group of artists. I've been a fan of Hillary's work probably as long as she's put it out into the world. I teach with Jeffrey Gibson, who's one of the other artists in the show who's not here. And when we started teaching together a few years ago, we became fast friends. And since doing the show here, I've gotten to know Joel's work more and love it every time I walk in the room and get to experience it. So Joel, I loved what you had to say about the ordinary to the extraordinary, and maybe you can see that this is sort of happening here. I travel a lot for my painting research. Most of my work in the last 10, 15 years has been painting, and ceramics is sort of newer to me. And so this was a site that I visited, going to visit farms. I did a body of work looking at food and farming production in the landscape in the United States. And there are lots of reasons that I go to sites to visit them, to get a sense of the place and meet people and get out of the studio. That's an important thing for me. And to have an experience like this. So this is in Tucson. It's January, about 5 years ago, and it was when there was a cold snap. And the temperature went below 32. And all of the, unbeknownst to this Midwesterner via the Northeast, all of the growth in a cactus is in the tip. So in order to preserve the life of cacti, you can just make little cozy, caps for hats for the cactus to get them through one cold night that happens every 3 years. So this was like a nursery where, the size of a football field, in every direction were cacti with these little tinkering styrofoam cups on them. So from ordinary to extraordinary, turning what's like so overlooked and trash basically into this life-saving device for these plants that are already such, survivors. And this was something then that I had tried to make. I loved this location so much and this whole idea, and I wanted to make a painting about it, and I'd worked with this idea for a while, and I just couldn't make the styrofoam cups look like anything but white smears in the painting. And at the same time, I was kind of also frustrated with my painting practice, and so I wanted to do something different. So I didn't know what was going to happen, and I started going to this community ceramic center near where I live in upstate New York, and kind of just experimenting, working with clay. I did ceramics in high school, but I hadn't done it in a long time. And so one thing led to another, and a year and a half later, I sort of had this whole collection of these cacti. So that's what's happening here. Maybe you saw this in the gallery downstairs. And I know that maybe that narrative isn't evident if you're not familiar with cactus growth in cold climates. And in fact, I'm giving a lecture in Tucson in a month, so I'm going to be very curious when I show that picture, if everyone knows exactly what's going on. But it also I also think that it's just the relationship between the landscape and the accumulation of trash, and again, these plants especially that are fighting so hard to survive, and all of the kind of things we do that just kind of with throwing trash and detritus and things that end up stuck in the plant life all over. I think at least that is evident in this piece too. So, like I said, I'm kind of new to clay, and this for me, it just took me out of the sort of space that painting was challenging for me. And I kind of, by limiting the forms, it allowed me to sort of play around with the materials more. And I think sort of Hillary was saying too about pushing materials and see how they work together. I'm really, in my paintings, I'm always trying to push the material, see what you can do with it, the way to describe objects through the paint or through the clay. Lots of failure in painting and clay making, especially clay making, working with clay because it was new, firing stuff at the wrong temperature, and sometimes it was like a beautiful disaster, and sometimes an ugly disaster, and each kind of, led to interesting things. And then I kind of liberated from the cups a bit and started just making some kind of cacti, plant-like forms. This has dyed porcupine quills, ceramic, and beetle wings. The flower's made of beetle wings. Working with porcupine quills is not fun. And I think partially coming from painting, where you just put a painting on the wall and then it's done, you're like, great, looks great, let's go. Starting to enter into sculpture, I still kind of am not sure how to display it, and so I've kind of thought of these as very perfunctory displays, like as if it was in a store. So I kind of think of them like that. And this is actually the last piece that I made of the cacti, and this to me, I like the table for all of its explorations and discoveries, but this was sort of where I really felt like the sculpture had come to a place. It was activating the space. I had a vision of what I wanted to execute and executed it. It's also a kind of a marriage of in a way. Like I didn't, it became a rainbow shape. They're obviously they're obviously in a relationship with each other. Duh. And then sort of just as I was like thinking of, usually I talk about painting and not so much about the ceramic work, so sort of thinking about this in terms of my work and dealing a lot with American landscape, and I'll show some paintings in a minute here. I lived in Italy in 2007 and 2008, and there was this neighborhood there, some of you probably know, called Testaccio. And in that neighborhood, there's a mountain that's made out of discarded shards of Roman amphora. And so I've spent a lot of time looking at the American landscape, and also the ways that we affect the landscape, whether it's intentionally through the built environment or things that are detritus or waste that builds up. So this was, it's 45 meters high. It's a mountain, and it's a mountain that's been there for a couple thousand years, made out of trash, which happened to be, became trash. So I sort of had carried that around with me for a while. This is a corn pile. Often in this country, there's a surplus of food, as we know, often not too, scarcity. But when it's a good year for corn, there's a big surplus, and they often don't have enough silos to contain it, and they're just these huge mountains of corn that build up in Iowa, Illinois, other states. So this is a painting I made based on that. I didn't actually see a corn. I've been to some of the corn locations, but they were not good years when I went, so they didn't have the giant pile of corn. So the cacti in these couple of paintings are from a body of work called Surplus. I think Surplus thinking of my own tendencies of kind of going overboard perhaps with some of the touch and surfaces of the things I make. There is corn in this painting, which took a while to figure, this isn't like, making art is hard in some ways, but then also kind of ridiculous when you're like, how am I gonna get the corn to stick on my painting? Which had a lot of problem with mice eating the corn off. So if you do this, you have to make it vertically, because otherwise the mice eat it, if you have it horizontally in your country studio. But I also think that, this is sort of a way where the ceramics, I think, started influencing the paintings too. Just kind of thinking, opening up what the kind of surface, the materials you use, and how you can sort of activate the surface. This is a painting downstairs. Don't eat it, it's embedded in acrylic. So just I'm talking about the couple of paintings in the show. This is another painting called Crop Dusters, kind of based on, I did flew aerially over some farm areas, especially in Colorado. And I think a lot about the formal relationship between what I'm using in the painting and how that might describe the thing that I'm depicting in the painting. So I've long wanted to use, and things that are sort of modernist painting arsenal. So I wanted to use spray paint, but for something that sort of seemed to relate to what was happening in the painting. So this is using spray paint to sort of kind of describe chemtrails and the sort of overarching patriotic poison. This is a painting called Rotting Halloween. I painted this after going to a farm and visiting the compost at a farm. So those of you who compost, you put all of your stuff in a bucket and then you throw it in a backyard, and then it's just a giant rotting, disgusting pile in your backyard and you never use it. Maybe some of you actually use it. But at a farm, because the acidity is different, it's organized by each thing. So there's like a field of rotting tomatoes, and a field of rotting apples, and a field of rotting squash. And, I thought that was kind of also, I think a lot about painting, like a color field painting. It was like different color fields of this rotting material. And then also that provided such a great kind of reason to paint, in terms of the paint surface decaying and the way that the organic objects are coming undone. And I'll just talk a couple minutes about some of the newer pieces. So those are all kind of together as one body of work, the ceramic and the paintings. And then I was like, I don't know what else I would make ceramics about. I knew I would keep painting. I've been painting for a long time. So it took a while, and then in the last year I just kind of remembered, I was gonna say I have a flashback to Vietnam, but that just sounds weird. I remembered this trip to Vietnam, just as kind of a tourist, maybe 7 years ago, and kind of being overwhelmed by how much trash was on the beach there. There's plenty of trash in the beaches here too, but it was just sort of an experience of that. And we were kind of playfully taking some of the trash and kind of morphing it together with some of the organic and geological objects we had found. Some had already been morphed together. And then as I was thinking about that in the last year, I read about this newly formed the newest geological term, which is a plastaglomerate, which was kind of discovered by this artist, Kelly Jasvac, and a couple of scientists on the beaches of Hawaii, where plastic and sand and shells and organic material had fused together through basically burning fires on the beaches to actually make this new geological object. So I kind of took that and started thinking about this sort of hybridity, this world that we live in where things are maybe, they're all at times coming together. Some things are organic and some are geological and some are plastic, and then they're also kind of becoming a fused together object. So these are just the last few pieces. I can't even remember the titles, so I have to look them up for you. This is bottle tops and barnacles. That was so hard to remember. And then, but the titles of them I have all as one word, so as if the language has also fused together. So it's one, that's why it's hard to remember, because it's one big long word. Okay, that makes me sound like a genius. So they're the combination of found objects. I collected a bunch of pieces from the Hudson River where I live, the Gulf Coast, also my own discarded trash. This is my old laptop. That's my broken statue leg, so things that were kind of slated for me to put into a landfill. This is called laptop leg zebra mussels. And zebra mussels are an invasive species, and they tend to fully cover whatever object they attach to. And that's something I've also been looking at for years, like shopping carts, boats, buckets, and they're completely covered with these. So these zebra mussels are made and some found too. Not found zebra mussels, but. This is Crabby Bottle Top Golf Balls Weather Radio. And just the last piece I'll talk about is, and then how sort of painting kind of made its way back into ceramics. So I've been for years wanting to make a painting about CDs. CDs to me are so beautiful. They're just they're rainbow machines. They're givers of information, good or bad, music, movies, everything. But they're obsolete and they're just trash. So they're just dead information rainbows in a landfill. They also sometimes are used to keep animals out of fruit trees. So that's one place that I had seen them on farms, which is what this is. I do love this little painting. However, I kind of wanted to make a bigger painting and with a scene. I never liked what I made. So I was happy to find a way to kind of actually incorporate the physical CDs. I'd also worked on a bunch of ceramic pieces with CDs, but this is called Nest and CD Foil. Again, like a kind of fusing of a handmade object, a natural found object, and trash. And I took discarded CDs and sliced them and peeled the foil off, and it kind of acts like a gold leaf in a way. So it's kind of decoupaged on the surface of the clay, like a gold leaf would. And then kind of felt like the object needed something else, which is, Hillary, I liked how she was talking about like cannibalizing your own work, and I found that the ceramics has been great for that, where I can kind of like make a move or how to sort of solve it just sort of happens. And I had this bird, I was like walking in and out of the house from the studio, kept seeing this bird's nest, and then thinking of sort of making kind of my own bird's nest, or collecting all of these objects, turning these sort of trash into treasures as well. So that's it. Thank you.